Ricky Mujica, welcome to the Undraped Artist Podcast.
What's up, little brother?
It's great to see you. Yeah,
Yeah,
we've
you too.
we've been friends for a while, so this is a pleasure to have you on the podcast and talk about your life and what you're up to. But
It's a
the first
pleasure.
thing I want to talk about is you've got a crazy life. I remember one time we were at dinner at the porch side and you were telling me about all the crazy things you did and how you grew up in New York City. I'm not gonna say, I'm gonna leave it up to you, but and like it remind me you like roller skated and break danced or something and like you've had your boxing. Yeah. All right. Tell us a little bit about your background and bring us up into where you're at today as a professional painter.
Well, I started painting. I've been drawing my whole life, right? And my mother was an artist, and when we get to the painting of my mother, I'll talk more about her because I
Okay.
think her story is really, really interesting. Um, when I was 15, I got into the High School of Art and Design, and Max Ginsberg was my high school art teacher because he was in the public school system at that time. He and his best friend, Erwin Greenberg. And they had this morning group where we would come at 5:30 in the morning before the school opens. The janitor would come at 6, open the doors, and then we'd rush up to the fourth floor uh, to paint before school. And it was a wonderful experience. And Max was painting, he wasn't getting paid. Um, and none of us were getting any credit. In fact, we received a lot of flack because the other teachers would tell Max and Greeny, Max's best friend, why are you teaching them this stuff? They'll never make a living with this.
Hmm.
Um, and it was funny because we had Max in the class. My One of my best friends was Garen Baker. He was in that group. Mark Texera, who's a famous comic artist responsible for Ghost Rider, was in that group. Stephen Assel was an upperclassman. Costa Varayacas, who teaches at the league, was upperclassman. Lowerclassmen, we had Sam Goodsell and a few other uh,
What does that mean,
who became
upperclassmen?
prominent artists.
You mean they were higher?
Upperclassman means that he was older, right?
Oh,
So,
okay.
I was a sophomore. Steve was a senior.
Oh, okay.
Uh, and then it was open at like when all of these when all of us when we graduated, we went to college, we would still come and paint in the morning before going to school, before going to our college. So like I went to Parsons School of Design, but in the morning I would go to the morning class and paint and then go to my college classes. And so I was, older than some of the younger people. And Stephen Assel, when he was going to Pratt, would come in and paint, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. Uh, in the summer between my 11th and 12th grade, Stephen Assel set up a little group for the summer where we rented out a ballet room back when things cost nothing in New York. I mean, New York was bankrupt and buildings were falling apart. And so he rented this little ballet room on 57th Street, 56th Street and 8th Avenue. And we painted together for the summer. And we all paid a quarter, or
Get
was it
out of
quarter, a
town.
quarter or 50 cents. And that paid for the model and it paid for the room, which was like, you know, probably something like $3 an hour or something.
Can I
And
interject here one thing? So people who don't know some of these names, to me, it's like if you grew up in the Renaissance, going to high school. I mean, obviously, they didn't have high school the way we do now, but you're going to high school and you just happen to have your teacher be Da Vinci and your classmates be Rubin, Michelangelo, and David. I mean, it's like, you got to be kidding me that that lineup is unbelievable.
it really is. I mean, if you've never seen Stephen Assel paint live, it's crazy. And he was already like just an incredible painter. Like at 16, 17, he went to the Art Students League at 11 years old. He's studying with Ray Berger and Robert Beverly Hale. Um, so he was, but that's the quality. of the people that were in that group, and it was just because we were painting every day, and that was the common thread. We every morning we painted,
Hmm.
um, and just from life, and that was it. And it really helped us, like I mean, and in spite of all the other teachers in the school, some of them would say, "Max, what are you doing? You should be encouraging them to learn paste up some mechanicals," which that's gone because of Photoshop.
Yeah.
They would ask us, he would tell them, and the other teachers would say, "You'll never make a living." The funny thing is that year after year, every single person that went to that morning group, and there was only a couple of us, right? All got scholarships, and the other teachers would say, "Oh, that stuff is old hat, right? That's old hat stuff. Why are you doing that stuff?" So we called the group the Old Hat Club,
Yeah.
but we all got full ride scholarships um, because of that group, and even at a time when realism was not looked kindly upon, by the galleries. Uh, it was really interesting. Anyway, so that's where I started painting, and that's how I started. Those are my beginnings. And then I went to Parsons School of Design and Parsons in Paris. Um, and then from there, I did a whole mess of other things because the life of the artist affords you lots of opportunities. The first thing that happened is that I started doing illustration because that was the only venue back then. Max was doing illustration. Well, Max started to do illustration from his teaching, and then he quit teaching because he was making so much money doing the romance covers. And then Steve followed, and I don't think he likes to be remembered as an illustrator, so don't tell anybody. Um,
Okay.
um,
Stops here.
you could,
We all
um,
know it. The secret's out.
everybody knows it's an unknown
Yeah.
secret,
Yeah.
and he was the top, right? And but his name was spelled a little different, so um, but we all became illustrators because that was the only venue uh, for us, and so I began to do illustration, and the illustration, right off the bat, paid really well in those days. Now it doesn't because now with the stock photography and the fact that the cover doesn't sell the book anymore, um, you don't make what you were making before, which was a pretty good amount for a kid getting out of college uh, and doing something he loves, painting. But the illustration afforded me, the ability to do all other things because I wasn't trapped in a 9 to 5. And so the first thing that happened was that the neighborhood kids knew that back when I was younger, I was involved in, a little bit of the breakdance, but it was before it was called breakdance, it was called battle dancing at that time. And so they asked me, the younger kids in the neighborhood asked me if I could uh, help them. And at that time, I had a studio. So I got out of college and I had a little studio on 94th Street and Columbus. And you imagine what that costs now, but back then it was $125 a month rent. And I had nothing but a bed and an easel
Hmm.
and a little box with a tiny TV. So it was a big wide open space that they would come to my house and break dance and then I would go to the clubs because they weren't old enough to go to the clubs. So I would go to the clubs and see the new moves, and then we'd come. And sometimes I go. There were projects on 94th Street. I would teach. I would say, "Oh, they did this move. They did this move. I don't know." And we'd try to figure it out on the marble floor of the of the projects. You know, in the lobby, and that because I was a little older, led to breakdancing tours. So I toured. Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Africa, parts of
Dang, you
Europe.
must have been
I
good.
was I was one of the early breakdancers. It wasn't so much that I was good, but that I was old enough that I didn't need a chaperone.
I'm sure it had to be a little more
Right,
than
so
that.
it was cheaper. It was
Yeah.
cheaper it was
Yeah.
cheaper for them to send me. Um, and so I, we did that. I came back, was breakdancing some more, and then I was also always boxing. I had been going boxing, and then I realized that my time was coming up where in those days, you can only be an amateur, you can only fight in the Golden Gloves until you're about 25.
Hmm.
And then, that cuts off, you weren't allowed to go after that. So I figured, all right, so now I'm 24, let me start training, And so I trained for the Golden Gloves, and I was, I ended up being a finalist, quarterfinalist, and placing in several, competitions, the Golden Gloves, the Spanish Gloves, the Metropolitan Games. And so that was my boxing career. And it was
That's
only because I wanted to meet that deadline. Um, uh, and then the funny thing is that I quit right when the deadline, when I wasn't allowed to enter any more competitions. And then when I turned 34, right after I turned 34, they moved the age up to 33. I would have liked to have stayed another year.
oh man. Wait, 24 or 34?
30, I was 34. When I became 34, they raised the age to 33. But I had to stop when I was 25 because that was the age when I was 25.
Oh,
It was
okay,
like
okay.
I wanted to go one more year, in the competition circuit. But that's not, that was breakdancing. Um, I was a skateboarder. I was one of the original Zoo Yorkers.
Oh, you said you roller skated too or something.
And I roller
Oh,
skated. Yeah, I
okay.
did. So I auditioned for, so before the roller skating, I was a skateboarder. I used to be one of the first to be riding the vertical ramps, but I also roller skated. I was, uh, I loved disco roller skating, and I had a little job at the Roxy roller skating rink, and I did a bunch of shows. We traveled around. We went to Canada. We went to Africa, doing these roller skating shows, and then I auditioned on a whim for a show called Starlight Express. It's a musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber, and the audition they sent me to. After the audition, they said, when can you come to England? We're rehearsing. We're rehearsing for a show that's rehearsing in England. It's multinational, and it's going to Japan for half a year, and then Australia for half a year. And so they said that was Tuesday. I had 4 illustrations to finish, and I said Saturday, and they said okay, the plane tickets will be there. Um, so I finished up my illustrations. I let my art director know that if they needed any changes, you'd have to call Garen Baker
Hmm.
uh, to make them. They didn't, thank goodness. And on Friday, I didn't tell anybody that I was going away um, because I didn't believe it. I got to the airport, the tickets were there. I get to England, and then I sent out postcards. I let my mother know and my brother know that I was in Europe. Um, and that was great. We rehearsed in England for 5 weeks. Um, with I don't know if any of you remember, there was a movie called Willows. So we were rehearsing at Elstree Studios, which is like their Hollywood, while Willows was being filmed, which was like a gladiator type movie. So I'd go to eat, and there were all gladiators and dwarfs, you know, eating with us. And it was a really fun time. And then we went to Japan for about 5 or 6 months, and then we went to Australia for 6 months, where I, you know, picked up my first wife. I've been married a couple of times. Um, and then
Wow.
there's been other things since then, but those are the main things. And each time I come back, and art has always been my friend, especially illustration had, like every time I got back, I just jumped right in. And uh, the art directors, who had become friends of mine for a lot of these major book companies, Scholastic, Bantam, Avon, Harper Collins, were excited to hear my stories, and then they would just give me as much work as I wanted. And so that gave me freedom. So that always allowed me to keep coming back, to get back in and to do these crazy things. Um, Around 2005, I started seeing the signs, that illustration was gonna not be as lucrative as it had been in the past. And I also was tired of doing it. I wasn't signing them anymore. I didn't want to, I didn't, it wasn't my work. It was, generic, embracing. Um, a lot of it was the romance covers. There were sometimes I did some classics. Around 2005, I realized that I wanted to start painting my own stuff again. And I started going to the Art Students League. They have a members painting thing where there's no teacher. You just come in and they have a model for you on Saturdays. And Max would be there, and Steven Assel would be there sometimes. And I started painting again. And after all those years having not painted from life, it was crazy. I had lost all my skill to paint
Hmm.
from life. It's a whole different
So,
thing
do you mind
painting
me
from.
asking about how old you were in 2005? I mean, I think that's because I
So
have a lot of I have a lot of older students that are kind of making life changes. It would be inspiring, I
well,
think.
I'm yeah, well, I'm 61 now.
Oh, so you're
So
in your
what year? I
40s.
don't even know what year this. What year is this?
It's
I don't even know what year this is.
2022. So that would have
Yeah.
been
So
17 years ago. So you were what,
yeah,
40, 44?
yeah. So I was already like, I'm like, I gotta get out of this illustration thing. I really want to start doing my own painting. Um, but I've been painting from photos for so long, um, with the illustration that, you lose your skill, I think, and so like I'm, and also I wasn't, like doing all these other things. Oh, I did stand-up comedy for 4 years.
Oh my gosh, you need to write a book. That is crazy.
I did some stand-up comedy for 4 years, and through those 4 years, I barely painted, Um, but anyway, I it was tough getting back into it, and I slowly started doing more and more of that, and then in 2015, when we moved here, I did my last illustration, and I called up all the art directors, and I told them I wasn't going to do any more illustration. I had a couple of galleries that were, feeding me regular work. I mean, like selling my paintings regularly. So it was really a good time, and I had someone helping me get commissions. Um, so that, that's what happened. And then the pandemic hit, and so I lost my galleries. I had an online gallery, they closed down, and the online gallery would sell prints of my work, but usually one painting, which was the multitasking one. You know, it
Hmm.
would it would just it would just every month I would get orders for prints of that painting, um, and that's pretty much it. And then now, now I'm painting. I'm teaching a lot, and I wish I had discovered how much I love teaching sooner. I would have done it a long time ago. I'm finding teaching to be incredibly rewarding. I think I get more out of it than the students. I almost feel guilty to take money,
Hmm.
because um, when you become a teacher, you're an eternal student as well. And so all these things that I have been doing my whole life, painting, I've been painting for 45 years. All these things that I've been doing my whole life, I have to now break it down and find a way to teach it and to get it across. And when the pandemic happened, I started teaching online as well with, the Art Students League and the Florence Academy. And that made me further have to clarify my ideas, about art and how to make a drawing and how to make a painting. And it's been just a really rewarding path. Anyway, so what happened is, I when the galleries closed, it was almost kind of like a relief, except that, I live in a very expensive area. So, we the relief, but along with the trepidation of like, oh, where am I going to make more money? Where am I going to make money? Um, so that's part of the tough part of it. However, um, you know, I'm looking now for the next thing, and so I'll tell you a story. So recently, I don't know if any of you know horror movies, um, but there's a movie franchise called Insidious, Insidious 5. is the one that they just finished filming. Um, and there's a lot of art in it. I won't be a spoiler, but the kid who's, you know, in the coma in Insidious 2, if you know the story, is now going to art school. And I was the art consultant for the movie, and I'm also doing all of his paintings because he's supposed to be a very realistic painter, very good, and the paintings sort of drive the movie, because he's doing one painting, and that painting changes as the movie goes. Um, but it was a great, great experience because I was here helping with the director, and they were hashing out ideas, and the director is very knowledgeable about art, Patrick Wilson, and he's very into Goya and stuff, and he wanted to bring some of that stuff in, and so we're in here hashing out ideas and about what the final painting should be, and what the different paintings, you know, what's possible. And so, it was a really fun time getting into sort of that dark painting, and especially when we were trying to figure out what the painting image that's going to change over the course of the movie. We were trying to figure out what that was. I was doing all kinds of paintings all over the place. I was like staying up and making, dozens of paintings of sketches, different ideas, trying to see how far we can go, and still teach. And on a really funny side note, one of the paintings that I did, the director loved. We didn't end up using that painting in the movie, but the director loved it, and it started us on the trajectory towards where we ended up with. But he said, let me take that with me to show to the crew. And he takes it home, and he gets home, and his dog is scared of the painting. He's still scared of the painting. He sends me a video. He's there is a video. Every time he holds the painting up to the dog barks and starts running away. But that whole process of just going outside of my comfort zone and doing paintings that I normally wouldn't do, that I'm not known for, really awakened the spark in me. One of the things that I always tell my students, when they ask me, what should I be painting? What should I be painting? Right? First thing I always tell them is that they need to look at as much art as you can, as much masterwork as you can, because that gives you ideas, tells you what you do, what you like, what you don't like, and not just realism, everything, abstract, conceptual art, all that stuff. You never know how that affects your painting and the ideas that you'll get from these things. Like you can't tell, but there's some influence in my work from the abstract expressionists of the 50s,
Hmm.
um, so I tell them, look at as much work as you can, try out as many things as you can, right? You'll know when you're when you're doing the right thing. When you go to sleep and all you can think about is your painting and getting back to the studio the next day, right? Have you had that,
Mm-hmm.
Jeff?
Oh
Right?
yeah,
Where
absolutely.
where you're working on a painting and you're going to sleep and you're thinking, oh man, do the hand like this, when you're just dreaming about the painting.
Yeah, it's all you can think
That's
about.
when all you can think about, and you're walking around doing all kinds of things, and you just can't wait to get home to your painting, to your studio. Um, that's the paintings that you want to do, right? I tell you do the paintings that you would buy. That if you saw that painting at a gallery, you would starve for a month to be able to afford it, right? And that comes with you not being able to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
because you're so excited about this painting. And if you have that excitement, other people will respond to that, right?
Oh, let
Well,
me tell you something a client said to me that you just reminded me of. He said about, because he's been a client for the past, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And he said to me the other day about another client who wanted to get a little overly involved in the painting process. And
oh
typically, I
gosh.
just don't want clients to be involved at all. I want complete creative control. And he said, "Well, let me talk to him." He says, "I know from experience that if I get involved at all, you do crappier paintings." I was like, it's the truth. You can't, I
That's
mean, you try
funny.
and teach a dog how to bark and they're not going to bark very well. It's like, you just got to let them do what they do, right?
You got to do what they do. You know, Woody Allen said in one of the movies. Woody Allen used uh, uh, what's his name, Gene Wilder. And I saw an interview. They were asking him about that. How was it working with Gene Wilder? Did you direct him a lot? And Gene Wilder says, no, no. You know, um, we talked, but that's why you hire somebody like Gene Wilder. You know, you let him do what he does.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I think it's a mistake. When people have you do a commission and then they sort of uh, just they watch you, they watch over you and try to put in their too much of their own input. Right? A little bit is okay, right? But
Yeah.
you're an artist. Well, regarding with this thing, when I was doing these paintings, I'm finding that I couldn't sleep. I could just all I could think about is especially after the dog was scared of my painting. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, and um, so now I know that um, I need to go to the next level because I haven't felt that feeling in a while. So when I was doing the painting of my wife, putting on the makeup and stuff, I couldn't wait to get back to the painting and the painting of my mother. Had so many other things to do, and the painting was just there. I just wanted to get back, and I'll tell more about that story. But I hadn't felt that in a while, and so I know now that I need to um, explore what's happening next before I get locked into another gallery. I have a couple of options with a couple of galleries, but um, I don't, not until I um, really see where I'm going to go with this.
So is it
That
is
makes
it that you
sense?
don't want to get in a gallery and have work that you're not passionate about and then sort of get stuck
Yeah,
doing that kind of work?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That happens. The really good galleries sort of let you do what you do. They
Mm-hmm.
guide you a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the galleries, they know their clientele, right? And if you start deviating, they're like, no, 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 do more of this, right? And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter how much you hate doing that. That's what sells, and you get addicted to the money as well, right? Um, that's what they sell, right? Because who knows what sells? I don't believe anybody really knows what can sell in this art world we live in is really crazy. I mean, when you consider that Mère d'Artiste, do you know Mère d'Artiste?
Mm-mm.
Um, Mère d'Artiste. So, Piero Manzoni, a conceptual artist from the 70s, uh, shit into tuna fish cans, 80 of them,
Gross, man.
and canned them and named it Mère d'Artiste, which is French for artist shit, right? And those cans, there are 80 of them. Every one of them is over $100,000, worth more than any of my paintings. But there's only 79 now because one of them blew up in a Dutch museum because they didn't have a temperature
Well,
controlled
come
room.
on. People
And,
are paying for
and
cans of crap,
yeah,
a hundred thousand
cans of
dollars.
crap. Well, not only that, the owner who donated the can that blew up to the Dutch museum,
Yeah.
right, sued the museum and came off with a settlement of like $100,000
Ah,
because he blamed the museum for not controlling the temperature in the room where he had this little can of shit. And so you don't
geez,
know
if
what's gonna
business gets
sell.
bad, I'm gonna stop flushing for crying out loud.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Or making bottles of pee or something. Um, but in some ways, some people will get a little bit discouraged by that, but I get encouraged by it,
Why
right?
is that?
Because it actually shows you that nobody really knows what sells, right? What
Well, that's
sells is
true.
what you're passionate about, right? And if I'm gonna be sitting down doing work that I'm just not that I don't care about. I'd rather be, maybe doing decorative finishes on walls or painting house painting, walls, because I did it for the longest time. I did, the romance covers. Um, I did the romance covers for a long time, and I was sometimes embarrassed to say that I did them, and I never signed them for 25 years. I didn't sign them, and it became just the work, that's why my skills deteriorated. It just became the bare minimum. And I'll give you a funny story. So back in, I guess, uh, 86, Odd Nerdrum was like a god to me. I had seen his show in 1984, the first show in New York, and we were all blown away. All of us from the morning group, we just kept going down there. Odd Nerdrum in those days was just amazing. And to me, at that time, he was God, because here I am thinking nobody can do and make any money, make a living doing the actual work that they loved, because we're all doing illustration. Um, you know, Here Adnerjo comes and proves us all wrong. Not only is he's, big hit, like the show was an incredible success, and his shows in Norway were, in spite of, government opposition to what he did, because the people in charge of the arts weren't into that old stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kitsch, right?
Mm-hmm.
That he never got much, but he still, like 50,000 people would go see his shows, the shows of his work, and so he's good. So now here I am. Now I'm a young break dancer, and I'm in Norway breakdancing, where my God, my hero lives. The guy was like a god for me at that time in those
Mm-hmm.
days, and um, turns out that one of the handlers who helped us with costumes and stuff, and helped that drove us to our venues, was friends with Ad Nejum. And I had one little painting, a print of a self-portrait that I did when I was 19. I think I have it over there. Maybe I'll show you. Um, I did that I did when I was 19, and then everything else were reproductions of book covers. And he said, I showed Aunt Nedrum the print of your painting, and he loves it. He'd love to meet you.
Hmm.
And I backed out on it. I didn't, because I was so embarrassed. I was too embarrassed to tell him, because he said he'd like to see more of your work. We
Oh.
didn't have the internet in those days, so it's only what I had with me, right, which were the reproductions. I wasn't going to show Aunt Nedrum my book covers. I was just too embarrassed to meet up with him. And, small thinking on my part not to bring some of the work that I had been doing at that time, some of my own work. Um, but, what I believe is that what Ad Nejum would have told me had I gone to meet him is stick to your guns, do what you do, and put your passion into. And I wish I had, right? I wish I hadn't just uh, gone for the easy money,
Hmm.
and really, pursued, what I wanted to do, at that time. And that's just a lesson, right? That
But
you
all the
know,
great painters were doing it. I mean, you said yourself, Stephen Assail was an illustrator.
yeah.
I mean,
But Steve had the best attitude about it, right? I mean, Max didn't do any more of his own work while he was doing the illustration, right? It was, because he was, you know, doing a lot of the work. But Steven had the best attitude about it. First of all, he didn't use his real name,
hmm.
right? Um, Second, he he made it he dedicated Saturday all day, 18 hours Saturday, to work on his own paintings. So it didn't matter whether you had a deadline, you had unfinished work, you had anything else to do. Saturday was sacred. He would work on his own paintings, and then he was teaching as well, where he would bring a big canvas in, and he would paint. He would teach by painting, and so people watching him paint. Um, So he built up a body of work. I mean, it's amazing if you dedicate one day to your own work, uh, how you begin to build a body of work. It happens, and then you can get out of doing the stuff that you don't want to do.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's
Right?
inspiring. Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of people that have studied with me in the past that struggle with the idea of becoming an artist because they're like, I just don't have time. I have a full time job. I have
Yeah.
kids. I have a
Yeah.
spouse. Like, how can I? I'm like, I recommend this book called Atomic Habits to all these students. I can't remember the
Mm.
name of the author, but because I'm a believer that just a little bit consistently really adds up.
It's better. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. And Steve was very consistent, very consistent. And as a matter of fact, when Ad Nerdrum came to the city, for his show, uh, he saw Steve's work and said, Stephen Essel is the greatest American figurative artist, right? You know, he's the greatest figurative artist, but Stephen Essel is the greatest American, um, which I believed too and I still believe he's one of our modern Rembrandts.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, so that's basically it. But it is, I think, what I would tell myself if I was 25 again would be, stick to your guns, do the paintings that you want to do. I'm seeing paintings that I did when I was, 21 and 20 that I was doing when I was still trying to do my own work that the galleries were calling conventional.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm seeing a lot of people having success uh, doing the same thing that I was doing then. I see them now having great success, and part of me is a little jealous. Part of me is a little very excited for them, but it's also exciting for me because everything that I see reinforces the fact that you just got to be true to yourself. You got to do the work that you believe in, and you got to put passion into it, and you got to um, make the paintings that you would go hungry for to own. And if you
Yeah.
do that, other people are going to find you, and especially now with the internet, where the gatekeepers are gone. They're not completely gone, but it's a lot softer now. You know what I mean? Um, if you get 1 million followers on Instagram, the galleries will be beating down your door rather than the other way around. And that's the big difference now from what we had in 1985, where you could not get anywhere without a gallery,
Mm-hmm.
and,
Yeah.
and it had to be a good gallery.
Yeah. I feel like the internet has leveled the playing field, and not only that, but I think it's made it so that the public gets to decide now what's great art. Because it used to be, you
Exactly.
mentioned the gatekeepers. It used to
Yep.
be that there were the blue chip collectors and dealers
Yep.
would say would the dealers would tell them what was good, and then
Yeah,
they'd
that still
believe them
happens.
and buy it. But now the internet is saying, wait a minute, here's all this other stuff out there, and people are like, oh, so I don't just buy crap in cans? You mean there's other options? And
Yeah.
it's changing the world. I think
Well,
that's the only reason realism is coming back.
yes, yes. I was
Yeah.
just gonna say that. I agree with you 100%. I think the fact that the people can help decide what's good now is the reason that we have this whole realist movement. That's
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons that this whole realist movement is taking over because the people are
Mm-hmm.
voting with their clicks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, I mean, sometimes it's not always the best thing to let the mass decide what's good, right? Because then that leads to the least common denominator. But the great thing is that there are enough people in the world to find your people,
Mm-hmm.
to find the people that believe in your work. I've had plenty of gallerists tell me that my work is too personal,
Hmm.
right? I had one prominent gallerist who the gallery, but I'm not going to mention it on a recorded air. But told me that my work is too personal, and as a result, it looks amateurish.
Oh shit,
And
that's
and
just the
that stuff,
stupidest thing I've ever heard.
yeah. And
That's
so
what I
so
love about your
that's
work.
yeah. That well, it's one of the things so one of the things that I've learned is that uh, you got to take all of that stuff with a grain of salt, right? There are
Mm-hmm.
enough people who like my work and um, to make me happy. When I was younger, when I was 25, people would ask, to see my work, and I would show them, and they go, "Oh, you do that old stuff," and it would it was like a stab in the chest. But now with age, it doesn't bother me. There are people buying my work, so I'm happy for that. My big problem is that some of the paintings uh, get too careful. I care too much about. I can't sell. I don't want to sell it. I
I
don't
could
want to
see
sell the
that.
one of my mother. And so the paintings that keep me up at night because I want to work on them are also the ones that make it they become like your baby.
Mm-hmm.
They and you don't want to sell them. And when you do, like I sold the multitasking one that you like.
Oh, that's one of
Um,
my favorite paintings ever. Not just
my
of
wife
yours,
nearly killed me. Uh,
not just of yours, just in general, just of anybody's.
oh, thank you. Well, my wife nearly killed me when she found out I sold it.
You must have had a hard time selling that.
Well, a funny story with that one. I was working on it, that painting, and then I got stuck.
I'm gonna
It's the
pull it
other
up.
one.
I know we want to talk about your mother, but I'm gonna pull that one up right there. Go ahead and you go ahead and finish your thought. That's the one, right?
So yeah, that's the one, right? So I was working on that painting, but there were just too many problems. And then halfway through the painting, we moved. Um, and so the bathroom and her image in the bathroom, I had to do in another house.
Mm-hmm.
So like it was, it was, uh, so I was unhappy with it. There were lots of things I was unhappy with. Um, I was really loving painting this painting, but then you begin to see things that you think are wrong. Like for instance, um, the arm that's holding the baby from the elbow to the wrist is just too short, right? And it almost looks like it's like she has no hand, like she's amputated to me, right? And
Hmm.
and and there are problems in it, like I wasn't sure when we moved to the new place. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with that stuff in the foreground that we had in the old place. um and then I didn't have it, and I didn't have pictures of it or anything. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with that now that we're in a different place, and I know it needed something there. So there were lots of problems. So I just sort of put it down, and I would have taken it further if we had stayed in that house. But this collector who's bought several of my paintings would come to me every time. He's Dominican from the Dominican Republic, and every time he would come to my house, he would see what I'm painting, and he loved this painting, and he wanted to buy it off the easel. And I said, no, 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 no. There are too many problems with it. I still got to fix it. And he kept, bugging me. But I didn't, I was so busy at that time. I was doing, tremendous amount of work, and I didn't know what to do next to fix that arm. I didn't know how I was going to do that. Um, and I hadn't found an adequate solution for that foreground. So that's why it's also unfinished. And he came back. It was 4 months later, and I hadn't done a stroke on it. I hadn't painted anything on it. And he said, "Let me get it. Let me take it like that." I said, "It's not finished." He says, "You can do another one." I said, "Tell him everything is wrong. Just do another one." And I said to myself, "Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll do another one." So I sold it to him for way too little, right?
Huh.
And
You know,
he took it, but I never.
that arm
I
still doesn't
started.
bother me. Now that you mention, even though you mention it, it still doesn't bother me.
Yeah, I mean, but you're as an artist, it bothered me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I wasn't sure how I was gonna fix it, right? But then, when he said that, I said, you know what, I'm gonna start it. And I tried starting it again several times. I have several starts of it. um, um, literally working from this painting, from the print of this painting.
Hmm.
I tried to, but I don't. It's not the same when you're working off a print of a painting. I don't know if you've ever had to duplicate any of your
Mm.
paintings.
Not in that way,
It's
no.
just it's just not fun. So
Mm-mm.
like I never followed through with it. But it's this painting has been good to me over the years. It's sold a lot of prints. Every time a breastfeeding group or something comes across this painting, all of a sudden I know it because I get a ton of prints. But now I don't. My online gallery closed, and I'm trying to find another new place that makes beautiful prints like this. The place that I was using made gorgeous prints, but they closed down for the pandemic. And so and that's on my
Hmm.
to-do list because I've gotten several orders this month. I took several people reaching out to me asking me if they can buy a print this
Hmm.
month from
Yeah, I
this.
bet.
It's
It
funny, they don't care about any other painting, just this one.
well, it's just such a beautiful portrait of motherhood. I mean, it reminds me when when our kids were little. It's just
Yeah.
it's just a beautiful image, beautiful subject. All right. Well, let's look at the other painting you wanted to start with of your mom. I want to hear a little bit more about this painting.
So this painting, War Zone, and it's a tribute to growing up in 1970s New York, where all the buildings around me were burnt down or there were abandoned lots, and it was high crime. New York was the highest crime, fourth highest in the nation, and uh, it was just it was just a tough time, in New York. But in those days we had family. Everybody knew everybody in the street, so it wasn't 100% what you think about when you think about the 70s New York. Um, this painting, it started out with when my daughter was born. That's my daughter on my mother's lap. So when my daughter was born, I um, my wife and I were both working, really hard, doing a lot of work. And so my mom would come over to my studio every day, around 2 o'clock, to watch my daughter while I tried to get some work done because I was the one. My wife was going off to work, and I was the one at home with the baby. But I, needed work to get work done too. So my mom would come to help out, and Violet, my daughter Violet, would fall asleep on my mother's lap. And then one day I said, you know what? Why don't you pose like we'll have her fall asleep on your lap, and every day you come, I'll paint for an hour or two or however long she sleeps. Um, you know, and my mom's was cool with that. So I did the painting, most of the painting of her and my daughter. No background or nothing. I was finished. I did um, uh, on her, everything was finished except there was no chair. Like, I hadn't painted the chair. And her dress was just yellow, right? Because in this case, the way I handled the the pattern on the dress was that I painted all the form first, the yellow of the dress, and then when it was dry, I glazed the pattern on.
Oh, it doesn't look
And
glazed.
yes,
It's
yeah,
interesting.
the pattern is glazed, and then a little bit of paint as well, but yeah, so the I had the baby was finished. She was mostly finished, pretty much finished, except for the dress. There was no chairs, no background. And then my mom got cancer,
Oh, I'm sorry.
and she couldn't come and help us. And for the next 2 years, it was a constant battle with the health insurance, uh, trying to get them to pay because apparently this was her second time getting cancer. The first time she had colon cancer. This time it was a sarcoma, but the first time she maxed out her insurance. And so getting them to pay was a full-time job with the health insurance. And so the next 2 years it was that. So she didn't, I had to put the painting aside. And then my mom passed away from the cancer.
Mm.
And I put the painting away and didn't think much about it. And then we moved in 2000. That was, what year was that? I think that was like 2009. Yeah, 2007 to 2009 is when I started it. And then years later, when I 2015, we moved to Montclair. So I got this beautiful studio and we have here. And when I was unpacking, my wife saw the painting and said, you really need to finish that painting. And I said, yeah, you're right. So I just started to think about it a lot. Well, I I have my mom, several photos of my mom in that dress, um, because I was one of her favorite dresses, and that's what she would put that on when she would come over, to help with my daughter, or when she was cleaning around the house. That was her cleaning dress, and so I finished up the dress from that. I, I we had that chair, so I finished up the chair. I set up that chair from life, the chair and the pillow. Um, uh, and then I did the background and the books, and so everything in there has meaning. So first of all, you'll see that my mom, you'll see the cross behind my mom's head, right? That's a meaning, and then you'll see if you look closely, you'll see on her forehead, she's got the cross from the Palm Sunday or the Ash Wednesday, right? So that's something I always remembered about her.
Oh
So it's
yeah, it's very subtle.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's very subtle. I think I'm maybe too subtle. People think it's a
I don't
bad
know. I
painting.
think it's great. Wow.
So because in the 70s, and so the baby is sort of a metaphor for me, or for every child, the parent looks after, and or the grandparents look after while the parents are away, like they're working and stuff. And for my mother, um, God was kind of like a babysitter. And I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is that uh, the only way she would let us go out, because New York was crazy, was that, she would pray for God to protect us, and would put, we would have, she would have the Virgin Mary by our bed, all kinds of things. But so that's what that's about. That was the protection, and why we have that sky, with the, sort of the God overlooking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, the the background, as I said, that's 70s New York, all burnt down, and abandoned lots. The 70s of New York that I grew up in, and then you'll see on the left there are books, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the books, my mom went to college when she was 65. It took her 15 years to graduate,
What?
but she
Wait, so
did.
she graduated at 80?
Yeah. And then
Whoa.
she died at 86, but
What an inspiration.
she went back to college, and it took her 15 years because she kept failing classes, right? But she did it, right? And she got a lot of criticism from the other old ladies. And
Oh.
they would say, "Oh, what are you doing going to college? Or what do you think you're going to get a job?" And my mother said, "I don't care about that. I just care. All the thing I care about is that in my small town, nobody went to college. And so when I die, I want to be buried with my diploma in one hand and my ring in the other." Uh, and and and, and she finished she finished college. It was one of the proudest moments of her life. And so she kept the college books, and they were always there on the table like a trophy. And then that little pencil box above the book, that wooden pencil boxes, was an Indian artifact, because she's, from Dominican Republic, but she's I'm pretty sure she's got Indian blood, or she at least thinks so, thought so. So that's like, native to Dominican Republic, hand carved little pencil box that she used, and uh, so that's what the books signify, and uh, and then you see the on her lap is a sort of a hand embroidered uh, sort of
Like a
yeah,
scarf?
blanket. Yeah, she made herself, but it all the stuff that she made herself, and you see the pillow behind her head is the same. She made herself. She knit, and it all looked like. very Native American Indian, but it was, very Dominican Indian stuff,
Hmm.
or Dominican native stuff that she would mix up that had something to do with it, right? My mom was very interesting case, was very interesting because um, when she was 19, there was a guy, she comes from a really small town in Dominican Republic, uh, a tiny, tiny little town. And nobody had gone to college, like it wasn't, it wasn't that kind of town. But then uh, this guy came. He had studied art, and he had learned. He had studied art in Europe, and he was a professional artist, and he was, a gringo who, gringo means, an American or a white person, right? Who uh, he found that little town and set up, because it was cheap. He set it up as his studio to do his art. And what he would do is he'd have all the kids from the neighborhood would clean up his studio and do stuff like that. And in exchange, he would give them art lessons. And so my mother became his best student. I still have some of the paintings. They were really good.
Hmm.
And when she was 21, he submit her work to some academy in Europe. I'm not sure where, right? In somewhere in Northern Europe. Um, he submitted her work, and they offered her a full ride scholarship.
Wow.
But her mom, when she told her mom said, "No, no, you're not doing that. You're gonna stay here, and instead of learning how to do art, you need to learn how to cook and clean so you can get a man."
Hmm.
And wouldn't let her go, and she held that her whole life. She that pain that she wanted to be an artist. When my brother had a different father. He left when my brother was about 2 months old, and that's another story there. But he left when he was about 2 months old, and he was the love of my mother's life, um, for several reasons. But he was the love of her life, and when he left, she pulled out an old box of paint box that's like, it was an old box from like 1917 or something like that, right? And these old rusted tubes of paint that you had to pry them open, but the paint was still good, believe it or not. Um, uh, and she began to paint again. And so she spent the last years of her life painting. And so she was always very supportive of me and my brother. My brother he's an a graffiti abstract. That's what he calls it, urban abstract.
Hmm.
Um, and he's in a blue chip gallery. So my
He
mom was
is.
very, yeah.
Whoa.
So my mom was, yeah, the gallery where my brother, George Senwan Murillo, where he exhibits. They sell Chagall, Miro. They have a couple of Rembrandt prints. They sell Picasso. They sell Helen Frankenthaler. And every time they do a catalog, they put his paintings in with those people.
Are you the only two
So
kids? Her only two kids?
yeah, we're the only two.
So
Yeah,
you both ended up artists. How about that?
we both ended up artists. And my
Wow.
mom was very, very, very encouraging of that. My brother came. Uh, you're talking about making a change late in your life. Uh, my brother was a concierge. And he had been doing graffiti his whole life, but he never thought about selling it or anything. And then around, I guess, what year was that? Um, around this time, around 2009, about 2008, something like that. My wife was at that time had just finished working for Diane von Furstenberg and now was the creative director for Rachel Roy. Asked my brother if she could see some of my brother's graffiti, and he gave her a bunch of the books, and she loved it, and she took them and made prints for dresses, graffiti dresses, and they were very popular. They set a whole trend because nobody was doing that. And Macy's hired my brother to do the store windows, 5, 6 windows, right? And then that began his career, right? Like,
Hmm.
and it was at that same time that um, he it was at that same time that he lost his job. But now he had all these commissions to do because of Rachel Roy and stuff. And then for the fashion line, for the promotion of it, they did this whole thing. And my mom, when she passed away, we made a deal with the landlord because she was in a Mitchell Lamo apartment, government subsidized apartment. And we made, and that building had become private now, right?
Mm-hmm.
We made a deal with the landlord that he could stay there rent free for 6 months, and then and some money which he pushed to his kids' college fund. Um, and in that time, he got his career started. He used my mom's old apartment as his studio. But then, in I don't know, around 2015 or something, he starts dating this woman from England because he's going around doing all of these lectures, but not really making a lot of money, right? And he starts dating this woman from England who's financially well off. She's a businesswoman, and they're having this long distance relationship. And she says, "Hey, George, I have this business meeting where we're pitching something, to make this big deal in Boston. Do you want to come?" And he says, "Sure." So now here my brother is. He's sitting there uh, having dinner the first night. He had brought a bunch of his work because his girlfriend wanted to show her friend, her business partner, my brother's work. Maybe he might buy something or whatever. But he's got all his works with him and stuff and clippings, and because he's been in news, he's got a lot of news clippings and stuff, um, and they're sitting there strategizing over this $1 million deal. And my brother's feeling this small. He's feeling like nothing. He doesn't have enough money to even walk into that restaurant. It was a big 5-star restaurant in Boston. And he doesn't even have enough money to walk into that restaurant, let alone eat there. He's feeling really like down at the bottom of the barrel. He owes several months' rent, right? And and now he's in his 40s, right? He's making this change in his 40s. So he has no money. So he's feeling terrible. So they're on the way home. They pass by that big street of galleries in Boston. It has all the galleries. And his girlfriend says, "Hey, look at all those galleries. You should check them out while we're doing our meeting, and look and see other people's artwork." And he said, "Oh yeah, right." And then he made up his mind. I know what I'm going to do. So when they went off to do their meeting, he grabbed all the work that he had brought with him, and he decided he was going to knock on every door on every gallery.
Hmm.
He started the first gallery. He went in. "I am an artist. This is my work." He said some of the galleries, one gallery practically spit on him.
Oh,
Some of them
ouch.
laughed at him. They laughed, literally laughed at him um, uh, um, uh, for being so cocky to think, or so dumb to think that he could just walk into a gallery and that's how he was going to get into the gallery. Some of them wouldn't even open the door when they saw him, knocking on the door. They wouldn't even unlock the door. They would just, no, no, right? Um, but he goes to one gallery, and you and I probably would not have gone that gallery because in the window they had Picasso. They had, like there's a high-end blue chip gallery that is selling originals, Helen Frankenthaler, Robert Motherwell. And he walks in and strikes up a conversation. He walks in, he doesn't know
You
any
gotta
better,
be
right?
kidding me.
Yeah, and he strikes up a conversation with them, and
Okay, let me
says,
ask
"Hey,
you
yeah,
this. Let me ask you,
yeah."
is he clueless about the quality of the
He didn't
work,
go.
or is he really that
He
confident?
he was. It's not that he was confident; it's that he was down at the bottom.
He was doing whatever he could. He was just desperate.
He hit rock bottom. He hit rock
Desperate.
bottom. He
Okay.
was so embarrassed sitting at the dinner table and not having a cent in his pocket.
But it's still,
You
you
know
have
what I
to,
mean?
it
That
still
he
takes
just,
something to walk into a gallery with Picasso in the window.
yeah. Well, it takes hitting rock bottom. Yeah,
I
he's
guess
about to
so.
be
Yeah.
kicked out of his house. He's kicked out of his apartment. He has back on his rent. He's got no money to eat, right? Like, I mean, he's like, you got nothing to lose. And
Huh. It's
Um,
inspiring.
but he goes in, strikes up a conversation, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've been thinking about graffiti artists with your work," and they, "Oh, that's good work." And he's showing them clippings. He's got clippings. He's got a one when he was like 10 years old or 11. He did because I started out doing graffiti, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I used to take him with me. I was babysitting him. He's 7 years younger than me, and like I'm 14. I'm going up to the train yards to bomb the trains, and I'm taking him with me, and he's 7 years old, right? And that's how he got into graffiti. But then he kept on. I stopped when I met Max, and I started to do, this kind of painting. But he kept on, right? And he was bombing all the whole neighborhood. And so there's a little wanted poster for him, and it's a police drawing of him. Kind of looks like him too, right? A police drawing of him, and it says "Wanted for graffiti, George."
Oh my gosh, that's
And so
gold.
he showed them that. He's showing them that they're like, "Oh, that's great," And they took his card, his number, and then he didn't hear about it from them for a month. He finished up, went to every gallery, and of course he's demoralized at the end, except that he had a nice conversation with that one gallery. A few months, about a month later, they contact him and say, "Hey, would you like to submit a painting on consignment and see how we do?" Um, and he says, "Sure." So he does, and then they sell. It sells, and then they ask him for a couple more. He brings them 5 paintings, and they pick two paintings out of the 5, and they sell both of those, right? And then the next time he starts this relationship with them, and at one point, they're selling his work regularly. At that time, they're selling it at a low price point, but they're selling it, and they're putting him up with Chagall and stuff. And then all of a sudden, they stop selling his work. And this is where my brother had to learn, had to grow up, because he started to get cocky. That, look, I'm in a gallery with Chagall, um, and then, he was like, "Oh, screw them if they're not gonna get me, if they're not gonna send me work." And then he realizes that no, he needs them. So he goes and says, "What's going on? What's up?" And he sits down and has a talk. He says, "Look, you're getting a little bit the work that you're doing, right? It's not so much the work, it's just that you grow, because what he was doing is he's grabbing, he's finding like paintings in the street and then just painting over like some abandoned canvas or on piece of wood or cheap canvas from the store.
Hmm.
They say, "You can't do this. This is a high-end gallery. You can't be. This is embarrassing." And so we stopped on your work. And he said, "Well, look, give me a chance. You got to understand. He didn't finish high school. I didn't finish high school. I don't know. I didn't go to art school. And they said, well, we'll give you another." So he goes in and gets the best canvas, cutting in the big, thick stretches. And I teach him how to stretch, big canvas. And he begins to stretch them and do the big one. And then all of a sudden they're selling again. And they're like one of his big, they just had a show of his work. He's up at the $50,000 mark. And they think by next year he'll be in like $100,000 mark. And he just had a show with them. I think they sold like 9 paintings or something.
All at
Um,
40, 50,000.
yeah. Um,
That's
and
amazing.
he doesn't get all that, right, because
Oh
of
yeah, he
commission.
gets 20, 25 probably.
Yeah.
Still,
They
that's
also
awesome.
the gallery has an interesting setup that I had never seen before. Uh, they has they have brokers. You have real estate brokers to go and help you rent an apartment, right? They have
Mm-hmm.
brokers too that they also get a piece of the commission. In
Oh
other words,
man.
their whole job, they're making money selling paintings. They go out, they're brokers, like the same way you have a real estate broker, same
Yeah.
way you have a loan broker. They have painting brokers, right? Yeah,
Does that come out
like
of his
lots of.
cut, his 50% or their 50%?
It comes out of the whole thing, of the whole, both sides,
So was
right?
it? So what's the distribution?
So
33,
there's
33,
this.
33?
I don't know what his actual split is, but
Huh.
um, the
That's
the broker gets a percentage, and then the gallery takes half of what's left over.
ouch.
So, however, by next year they're going to be they're selling his paintings, for 100,000.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and they're trying to get them in the right places. Every time they sent out a catalog, the last catalog they had their 25-year anniversary, and they had big full page spread with my brother and his work on one side and Miro on the other.
He's got to be on
Miro's
cloud
and his,
nine. Good for him.
he is, and he's like the happiest I've ever seen him. He's eating healthy, you know. But you got to give it to him, and it just shows you um, so much of this is taking that step, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can imagine, you can think about your own um, trajectory, right? And so much of it, I'm sure, was you taking the step to go out and find your commissions. You know, uh, uh, there's so much of it is that you can't just sit in your house and wait, and you got to be willing to embarrass yourself and to get and to be told no. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and,
Well,
and
let me ask you about this painting. Did you sell it?
no, because this one is not for sale. So this is one of the
Okay,
ones
I'm
that
so glad to hear that. It
it's
is.
up. It's up. It's actually up at the Art Students League right now. Oh, I think this is. Oh, it just went down this weekend.
So how was it? Because your mom had already passed. Was it difficult to paint after she'd
No,
passed?
well, I had done when she was still coming. Like you have to realize that before she got the cancer,
No.
right?
I
She was.
understand. I mean, when so
Oh,
you finished her, but then you had to do the chair in the background, the books. Was
yeah.
it difficult
So,
to go back there emotionally and work on this painting
uh,
after she had passed?
well, enough time. It would have been almost impossible right after she had passed. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been able to do it. But now we're talking about she passed away in 2009, and I got to this painting back around 2015,
Oh,
2016.
okay.
Maybe around 2016 is when I started like to plan it. But by now it was out of love, right?
Right, right.
So there's more care in this than a lot of my paintings, because every inch of it, there's love in it, right? It's like there's the like this is one of those paintings where like um, I couldn't wait to get back to it the next day, and I can't tell you how many iterations the background went through before I settled on that, which I had to make up out of my head, right? Pretty
Mm-hmm.
much. Um, um, so there are lots of it went through lots of changes as I was thinking about it, but it was more a work of love. It was never meant for sale, right? But it was, I think in this business, I think you have two kinds of work that you need to do, right? You need to do the work that you are going to sell, that you plan on selling, and you need to do the kind of work that you think will get people to click or to notice you.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is that the work that sells will never get clicks, and the work that gets people to notice you will never sell. Just generally, but it's more likely that's the work that might end up in a museum if you should be so lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a funny catch 22. So you have to do the two kinds of work, and it's an interesting business model. You do work that you care about, but that you're not. It's not. Uh, in other words, you do work that you can allow yourself to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Put it
Mm-hmm.
that way, right? Because I'm not saying you have to do any less in terms of quality, right? But then you need to do the work that's gonna bring eyes over to you.
Right.
That's a very important thing. There's another one. Yeah, the right next to two to the left of that next one. That next one over. That one. Yeah. So this one I'd like to talk to you about a little bit because this one has a lot of meaning as well. This was my aunt who pretty much raised me. My mom was working a single mother, two boys, making $5,000 a year,
Oh my
right, in New
gosh.
York, and two jobs, $5,000, and that's with two jobs, right? And um, from the time, my thing was my father, my mother left my father, or they left, they broke up, about a month after I was born. Um, and So I didn't have a father either. My mom was a single mom. But in those days, in the '60s, I was born in '61. A woman didn't have many avenues for work to work. You'd be a teacher, right? Or you could be a secretary. In my mother's case, she was a key punch operator, which is the people, you have this little machine, and your job is they have seven keys, this little machine with seven keys that punches holes in the computer cards, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's how you used to program the computers, with these cards. You'd have like a stack of these cards and you have to feed them into the machine. And you had people like my mother, and their job was to translate that into, the holes, so, but, the machine would do it, right? You knew exactly what combinations made a letter A or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
for the computer. So she was a key punch operator. Um, But it was very hard for a single mother with a baby with no father, with a bastard baby, because my mom got her marriage annulled, to get work. So she sent me to Dominican Republic, when I was, before I was 1 year old, so that she could work. And I was there until I was about 5 years old.
Hmm.
I was about 5 years old. The war broke out in Dominican Republic. The U.S. sent troops. Uh, they were gonna go communist, right? So on one side you had my uncle, who was the general, big general Joselito Morillo Lopez, right? Was the
Mm-hmm.
big general. And on the other side we have Francisco, who was number two in line, number two in the Communist Party. And it's a whole other story for another time. I don't want to digress into another story, but that's a really interesting story in itself. But he um uh so the war broke out, and my brother's father, which is the reason my mother loved him so much, gave up his whole life savings, everything that he had, to get my mom to get me out of Dominican Republic, right? It's everything he had in the bank. He gave it to my mom. They hired people and they got me. So I came. I was about 5, 6 years old. I came, um, uh, to the U.S. Um, when I got older, my mom having two jobs, the person who kind of raised me was my aunt. So this is my mom's older sister, Anna, right, who sort of raised me more, and especially in my teen years, because I left home. I was about 12 or 13, and I moved in with Anna. And so Anna kind of raised me. So in lots of ways, she was my mother too, right? And when Violet, my daughter, was born, right, we were living in the same building as her. And but like I said, both of us were very busy. My wife and my mom is watching my daughter. I'm making the painting, and my aunt would said, bring your laundry and bring your daughter's laundry, because this is all my daughter's, baby clothes. Bring your daughter's laundry. I'll wash it and fold it for you. So every Thursday I would come down, she would do the laundry and she'd sit there folding the clothes, folding the baby clothes,
Hmm.
and we would watch novella, TV novella, telenovelas together. Uh, and I started this painting out. I began, at that time I was experimenting, I was beginning to feel uh, problems with painting in oil. I was getting sick from the turpentine. I didn't realize that if you just that you can go solvent free, that oil is no less toxic than watercolor. But at that time, I didn't know it. So I did a sketch, um, in and I have it somewhere over here. I did a using oil, water-based oil colors, right? Water soluble oils in house, and then I did this painting from that sketch that I did. I think I have it over here. So this over here, if you want to show me for a second,
Yeah.
this right here.
Oh yeah, back it away a little bit. Oh no, it's you can bring it forward. It's fine. It's just the internet connection's not amazing. That's you did
Right?
the painting from that?
Yeah, so this I would bring my these are water soluble oils, which I
Yeah.
hate,
Yeah,
right?
we all
And
do.
so I did the other painting from this, and you could see it's pretty close to what I have,
Yeah. Yeah, but you've
right?
really managed to put more information in the original.
Oh, yeah, well, there's um a lot of stuff. I mean, that stuff is easy. Like if I I put in the folds for the from the thing, and then I made up the pattern on her.
Mm-hmm.
I set up the still life of the clothes, and so because everything in here means something, right? So at the time when my aunt did this, she was 100 years old.
Oh my gosh, you got good genes.
Yeah, and my daughter wasn't a year old, so they were 100. They were exactly 100 years apart,
Wow, that
right?
is too
So,
cool.
which is too cool, right? And so she was helping, and so everything in here means something, right? So you see the light coming in the
Yeah.
window,
You got the Virgin
right?
Mary back
Is
here.
well, I'll explain that in a second too.
Okay.
The light's coming in the window, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's either sunrise or sunset, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's my daughter's clothes are sunrise, and she's sunset, right?
Hmm.
So the light coming in is that sunrise or sunset. You don't know what you can't tell which one it is
Right.
unless you know which way the building's been, since this is sort of made up in the
Right.
background,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Right.
Um, right? But it's sunrise and sunset, and that's what this is, right? And uh, the Virgin Mary. So this she has this statue, and I did this. Uh, I set up the statue, but I mean it was like it really literally like 3 or 4 strokes. So, but
Mm-hmm.
I had it, my aunt, um, and she let me borrow it. That statue was older than me, probably older than my mother.
Hmm.
It's always been in our house. It's the Virgin Mary, and so that's a symbol for her, right? She's always had that. And then you can't see it in the reproduction, but there's a police lock on the door because when I was living with her, we were in Harlem. Yeah, it's down here, a little bit lower. You can't see it. There's a
Hmm.
bar. It's a metal bar
Mm-hmm.
that holds the door, that props up against the door.
Mm-hmm.
We were living in Harlem, and it was very dangerous. Her husband, Joe, got mugged and beat up several times, shows up at the door bloody. But everybody in New York City at that time had 3 or 4 locks and a police lock. And the police lock is this metal bar that braces up against the door. And then there's a hole in the floor
Is that this right
that,
here? Is right
yeah,
here?
that's that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pointing at her, right? The police
Jeez.
lock. So so everything has a little bit of
What kind of
a
way to
meaning.
live is that? That's terrible.
Crazy. And in the back you see a little bit of a sofa, right? And you can barely tell. I mean, it's more for me, but you can barely tell that it's got the plastic covers over because
It's pretty shiny, yeah.
for my whole growing up, I thought all sofas had a plastic line. Every time I saw a sofa that didn't have the plastic covering over it, you know, uh, I thought, well, it would shock me because I grew up and if you sit on it with like your underwears and your skin is on it, it sticks to it when you go up. It was very funny, but that's the symbolism of there is trying to keep things new forever.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to it's the passage of time. The plastic sofa keeps it from from aging, her and she did. I mean, her furniture that she had until the day she died was older than me, much older than me, and still looked brand new. She still had an old Victrola. Her record player was one of those giant boxes,
Mm-hmm.
with um, an old Victrola record player.
Hmm.
Um, She managed to preserve her furniture for a long time. And anyway, that's the symbol for that is, it's the passage time, and we want to preserve what we have, right?
Well, I
Uh,
imagine she wasn't making much money either when you were young.
oh no, she wasn't. She's an interesting case in herself. She was a ladies' garment. She was a seamstress, and she one day I'm going through her stuff, and we were getting ready to when we were clearing out her apartment, which my brother took over her apartment and is now, that's now his studio. But when we were going through her stuff, we found the union card for the Ladies Garment Workers Union, the first year that they were a union. She was a member
Hmm.
the first year the Ladies Garment Workers Union was a union,
Hmm.
about like 1927 or something like that.
Wow.
And so that was so she never made a lot of money. She was living off Social Security for a long time. The apartment was government. It was in those days. It's now privately owned because it's out of the Mitchell-Lama. But in those days, it was government subsidized. Um, uh, yeah.
Hmm.
So that's the story behind this one.
Is there another one that
This
you in particular want to talk about?
Yeah, keep going about the other way to the right. I'll keep going. We're next to my mother on the other side. Yeah.
Hmm.
So this is kind of like a family portrait, right? So that's oh, I see a Freudian slip. I almost said my mother, but that's my wife. That's my wife and Julian, my son, breastfeeding. And he was done from he's like 5 strokes, 5 brush strokes.
Yeah, he's very simple.
It's very simple. It just happened. He just painted himself, like literally, like he was painted like I swear, I kid you not, like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have my daughter. You have my brother on the other side of my wife with the New York City shirt, right? And then you have me bringing my painting in. Originally, there was a baby carriage there, um, and there are some whips of this painting online where it's a baby carriage, but um, it wasn't right. I wanted a different idea.
Hmm.
And so this is about travel. You bring in your paintings and you see the New York City subway map and the train is stopped between stations for a light and there's a light from the workers. Now, the way this painting came about, the original seed for this painting and was I was visiting a friend up in all the way up, where the Dominican neighborhood is. What do you call it? Washington Heights, all the way up in Washington Heights, and I'm taking the A train down, and it's a hot day and summer day, and there's no air conditioning on that car, the particular car that I'm in, and it stops between tracks for the longest time. And there was a mother, a young Hispanic mother with a baby, and the baby kept crying, but it was the loudest, most piercing cry like you ever heard. It was just really grating, and you could see people combined with the heat of the car and the sweating, and the baby though just won't stop crying, and the poor mother trying to do everything she can to cry, and the father next to her trying to do make faces at the baby, trying to shake his hand, trying to give the baby the bottled milk, the bottled milk, and the baby's just not having it, just won't cry. And so finally the girl, just in her frustration, without any care for the fact that the train was full of people, just because of the way she was holding things and everything, she literally had to take off her shirt, pull out her breast, and just let it hang out in the open for everybody to see while she grabbed her baby and latched the baby onto her breast. And the baby immediately stopped crying. And you can see people almost applauded. Like they would have, if one person had applauded, I bet you the whole train would have started applauding. Because, but she stopped, and I was like, wow, that's just amazing. There was nothing the father could do. There was no way the father was going to stop this baby, right? But the mother, she just did that. All right. So fast forward a week later, and we're walking around on a Sunday in the neighborhood, part of the neighborhood where everything is closed. And we had forgotten to bring any milk or anything. And uh, Julian, my son, begins to cry really bad in the stroller. And we can't get him to stop. I try carrying him, he won't stop. So finally my mother says, my mother, I keep saying my mother, my wife,
She is a
uh,
mother. I get it.
yeah, she's a mother. She's also the boss in the family. There's no doubt. Right? You see, there's four of us there.
Hmm.
I'm fourth in line of power. I, I, I used to be fifth, but the cat died. I got a promotion, right? But anyway, so my wife stops and she sits down in the middle of the street. She did almost the exact same thing as this young woman did. She pulled out her breast and put the baby on, and he stopped. And he was, I just always like, I got to do a painting about this, because I think it's just an amazing thing what power that women have. And a lot of my work is about the matriarch, right? Respect for the matriarch. And because, as Latinos, and it's a theme in my brother's work too, is the mother, right? We were raised by strong mothers, and all of my friends, none of them had fathers, right? And all my brother's friends, none of them had fathers, right? Just because of the way the situation is, not because anybody's a deadbeat or anything like that. And it's just that the way it happens in this country, right? So none of us, had fathers, and so we were all raised by very strong mothers. And my mother, for instance, was a very, she's tough. She did everything that she could do to make money out, or to get us through and to get those things that we needed, even though she wasn't making that much money. And so my paintings are always have this respect for the matriarch, the powerful mother, seen from a man's point of view, right? Almost
Hmm.
like I'm a voyeur, almost like I'm a voyeur, um, totally giving in to that, to that, uh, the feeling of helplessness we have compared to, to the mothers of our babies when we're, you know, um, when it comes to raising our kids. So that's a big running theme, and I think it's one that I think I'm going to explore even more. As I told you earlier, that I'm looking to explore what's next,
Yeah, I hope
and I
you
was
do.
going to try.
And I hope you don't listen to that
Yeah,
gallery. I think this personal aspect of your work is one of its biggest strengths.
thank you. I appreciate that.
And to your point about
Um,
mothers too, I grew up very differently. I had a very traditional family. My dad was a good man, strong man. He was home. I mean, he was always there. And my mom was a
yeah,
stay-home mom. She never worked. She worked in the home. We were poor too. Not quite the same situation, but so she would do daycare in order to fill in the gaps. So there was always other babies around. So our house was a zoo. But but I mean my experience was the same in that my mother was the rock in the house.
the rock.
Always the rock. Like she's where the buck stopped, you know?
Yep,
Yeah. So I can I
that's how it is.
yeah. Even in a
Yeah,
traditional
that's
home
how it
like
is
that.
now. Yeah, well, I mean, the home now, right?
Mhm.
It's my wife is the rock. She is, you know, she's the strength. She holds it all together. It's amazing how she does it, and what she does, right? It's just, you know, it's just, the mother is the rock. It's in our family, and in my family, my brother, it was as well.
Hmm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, this is great. So, what else would you like to look at? Is there anything in
Um,
particular?
so there is, oh yeah, so all the way over three from the left. I'll show you one. Keep going all the way over that one, right?
Oh,
So this, I
this one's a
want,
little small. That's okay. It's a
yeah.
little blurry.
So what this is. is I did this when I was 16, so 17 years old from life, and uh,
Wow,
16
17?
going, yeah,
Good
and
for
it's
you,
4 feet
man.
by 4 feet, and that's Max as a 39-year-old. He was our high school teacher, and this was the a painting that I did in high school of of the high school art class where
That is
Max is the
so
teacher. Max,
cool.
all from life.
Do you still have it?
So I don't have it. That's up at the High School of Art and Design.
So you have access to it. You can see it.
I can see it, except that I hate when I see it because of course I'm using cheap paints in those days, and in those days I had just recently when I did this painting, I had just recently learned about Verdaccio, right?
Can you explain
You
that?
do a green tone,
Mm-hmm.
like you're painting on a dark green tone, like some of the early Renaissance masters, right? And so it's verdaccio. Verde is Latin for green or something like that. So verdaccio is this green, under priming. You prime it this green color, and there's a problem with pentimento, right? And pentimento is a tendency of oil paints to get transparent over time. Uh, they do, and no matter how good the the quality is, oil paint gets transparent over time. And in this case, these were cheap paints. So when I see it now, I almost want to cry because it's dark and it's green.
Oh,
And
bummer.
thank goodness Max took these photos. Several of us did murals. Garen Baker did one as well. Um,
Hmm.
and Max took these photos. He got these professionally done. So this is from a slide. This is a scan from a slide. But it's when the painting was still fresh and beautiful, the color. All the way on the right hand side, washing his brushes was my best friend Mark Texera,
Hmm.
who was an amazing painter. Probably Max still calls him the best draftsman he's ever had. But then he went on to comic books,
Hmm.
and he's responsible for the Ghost Rider and stuff. And he gets like thousands of people when he goes to Comic Con, sitting at his coming to get him to sign stuff, even though he's kind of retired from comics now.
That's
Um,
interesting. It's like a little
yeah,
renaissance in that high school.
it was amazing. It was an amazing time. So
Hmm.
anyway, so this was all from everything's from life, the still life, the thing in that. So
That
that's
is
that's
that is too cool. Well, I want to look at this one because it's
uh,
one that we can really look at how you paint. And maybe you
yeah.
could talk a little bit about how you approach painting.
Um, so yeah, so this one, a little background on this one. This was actually a sketch for the other one that has me, the other self-portrait of me. That's to the right of that. The other way,
Hmm.
yeah,
Oh, this way,
right.
right here.
Uh, and yeah,
So
before
obviously you
I
chose a
decided,
different head. Yeah.
I chose a different angle, right?
Right, right.
Both of these are done with mirrors. In
Okay.
fact, there's an article for this one. There's an article in uh, International Artist magazine, right?
Hmm.
Um, where I show my whole mirror setup. I did this. There's three mirrors, two side by side, kind of like the way you do in a fitting room, and
Hmm.
then one on a tripod so that I could get my eyes looking down, right?
Jeez.
And so the other one, the head, was originally I was going to do myself leaning up against the wall, uh, doing that. It was well, there's a story behind this. This is from a story. The parents lost their child, so this is loss. This is called loss, and you're thinking about the loss of a child, which is something I can't even bear to imagine. Um, um, but I had to do this painting because I was so moved by a certain loss, and so I ended up doing the other one where he's looking down, and that's a whole other story. I think beyond the scope of today's talk because that'll bring another half hour to this, which I think is already. But this one, So that's what this one is. And so I had a mirror above me and a mirror below me,
Hmm.
right? And so I'm looking at the mirror above, which is looking at the mirror below. And um, in those days, I was using, one of David Cassan's uh, parallel palettes,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you could put the palette up on a tripod, right? And
Mm-hmm.
paint. Um, I think I was using that then, right? In any case, there's a mirror above and a mirror below, and it's kind of funny. This painting came about really fast because it was meant to be a sketch. It wasn't even meant to be a finished painting. But the way I think about painting is I think about four stages. I think about it as if you're building a house, and on a side note, I'm completely solvent free these days. I don't use any solvents, and it's the best thing that I could have done.
Hmm.
Took me a while to figure out how to be solvent free because you find all these articles online. They only tell you, oh yeah, use walnut oil or use linseed oil. You can, but they don't tell you how to actually paint that way. And the way I figured it out was when I went to the Unfinished show with Bert Silverman,
Mm-hmm.
walking around and everything. I had discovered that solvents are relatively new. They're 1850.
What?
Before that,
No
yeah, it's
way.
1850. It's thanks to Winsor Newton, right? And
No,
it's
seriously?
coincides with, yeah,
I had
1850.
no
Before,
idea.
yeah, before that, nobody used them. So all those Rembrandt, beautiful Rembrandt. I prefer, the 17th century, anyways. But all
Yeah.
those beautiful Rembrandts, all those beautiful Vermeers, Rubens, they're all painted solvent free. And you see the block-ins are very different than you start seeing later, like with Turner and some of the other ones in the Unfinished show. Um, um, you have to do the underpainting with the paint as it comes out of the
Right.
of the of the tube, kind of like a dry brush effect. All right, so this is just as I'm beginning to go there,
Mm-hmm.
and um, I mean, you can clean your brush between strokes just using linseed oil. You wipe it off, and it's great. It's a fantastic way of working, and probably more sound. Anyway, so I think of a painting the way you're building a house. There's four stages, and the first stage is like the framework of the house. You see when you have all the two by fours lined up, right, and that's the block-in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for the block in, I'm only thinking about the proportions, the composition, and the light and dark. And I'm thinking of the light and dark just as flat shapes. I'm not doing the whole sphere and and egg shape for the ribs and a box for. I'm just thinking of flat shapes. Um, and when we think about it, that's what a camera sees, right?
Mm-hmm.
A camera, just sees flat shapes. I'm thinking of the flat shapes of the light and the dark. The One of the things that you know, that I've come to discover is that you can't really paint the nose. You can't really paint lips. You can sculpt the nose, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can really only paint the shapes that the light makes,
Right.
right? So in the very beginning, it's just the flat shapes. And what that does is that it gives you superpowers. And if I'm painting solvent free, I have to be a lot more accurate. I don't have the luxury of being able to just wipe out so easily like I did when I had solvents. So I have to be more methodical and more accurate, which is great. Makes me take time, right? But thinking of the block in as just flat shapes. It's not even a person. It's just the flat shape that the light makes and the flat shape that the dark makes. Thinking about that way, you get all kinds of superpowers, right? You get to measure, right? Because whenever you're measuring heads, you say you're doing a figure, you say, oh, it's 7.5 heads. You have to think of the figure as flat in order to do that, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you measure, you can find halfway points, you can find like sizes, angles, triangles, flowing lines, negative shapes. You can do all kinds of things that you can't if you're starting out thinking like this structural, sculptural thing. That's the first pass. It's the blocking. The second pass is the dead color layer, where it's still not a person to me, but I'm beginning to think in terms of uh, uh, planes and masses, and I think about it as if I'm putting up um, drywall. Your house. This is the part of the house you're putting drywall up onto that frame. And so when I get the dead color layer, that's my chance to experiment with color. I only have 6 colors on my palette. Um, I mostly only use 3 of them.
What
Um,
colors are they, if you remember off the top of your head?
yeah, so I have titanium white, I have cadmium yellow light, I have cadmium orange, cadmium red, magenta, viridian, and ultramarine blue. That's it.
Hmm.
And um, and so the dead color layer, you get to experiment what you need to mix, right? Because we want to get the person you're painting in this light with this environment, because the environment has a lot to do with the color, right? So the same person under different situations, you'll mix different colors, different color skin tones. And
Wait,
so
let me
um,
before you finish that thought. I'm thinking about your color palette. So you've got all reds and oranges, all warms, and one blue. Did I get
I
that
have two
wrong?
blues.
Two
I have
blues.
2 blues.
Well, yeah, it's all.
Viridian is a blue.
Oh, I
I think
forgot
of
the
Viridian.
Viridian. Right, the Viridian.
Yeah,
Okay,
Viridian is a blue. You
two
you you
blues.
add white to it, and it becomes like it becomes like cyan, right? When you add white to Viridian, and
Right,
so
right.
basically what I have
Yep.
is RGB,
Two yellows,
right?
two reds, two blues.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
have RGB and I have cyan, magenta, and uh, cyan, magenta, and yellow, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So but I used to have cadmium yellow medium instead of orange, but then I figured, I might as well just push it all the way. But
Hmm.
most of my paintings are done with, it's just the cadmium yellow light, the cadmium red or magenta, and the blue,
Hmm.
right? The blue really, it's amazing how flexible and how powerful that color palette is. Um, it's you can really, I don't know if you've seen the video. If you look out, if you ever get a moment, I posted it on Instagram, uh, where I took my little my little palette and I mixed like 30 different colors that everybody swears by. All the burnt sienna, and, lead tin yellow, and cerulean blue, and even cadmium red light, and I matched them exactly
Hmm.
with my palette. Right now, my feeling is if you can make the color, then you probably don't need it on your palette, except for convenience, right?
Right,
Because they make the colors, why not have them, right?
right.
If they make the colors, why not? But I don't need them. It takes longer to mix the colors, but it's worth it. You learn what your colors do,
Hmm.
right? And then if you have more colors, it becomes a luxury, not a necessity. So like I have other colors. Every once in a while, I might squeeze out something of something else. But rarely do I ever need it, and it's usually with really bright prismatic colors that you can't get to. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Have to that you have to get. You just can't mix. Like for instance, if have you ever seen Nelson Shank's painting of Leontine Price? That's at the National Portrait Gallery. Is a woman in red dress under stage theater lights. His son told me that he bought 12 different kinds of reds for that painting.
Really?
So, so there are certain situations where, okay, you might have to, uh, supplement the color, but generally you don't need it. I find that I don't need it. And you get better at mixing. At first it's tough, but then it's like, the colors are superfluous.
Right.
Um, but now this uh, image, is more garish than my actual painting. It's not, those yellows aren't so harsh as it is in the painting.
Hmm.
As an essence, I remember it wasn't done as a finish; it was done as a sketch, as a portrait sketch, and then I kept it right. Um,
Yeah.
anyway, but this so that's the second. I'm putting up the planes. I'm thinking of, the walls. It's like you're putting up the walls.
But you said they're in
Everything is
dead
either.
color. Does that mean they're sort of low
No, I
chroma?
I call it I call it the dead color, meaning that color is going to go under. It's going to
Oh,
get
that's the only
it's going to get
reason. They're
covered over.
not gray
It's going
or
to get
anything.
buried. It's going to get buried. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but it's a good opportunity to try out. Sometimes you let that color come through, but it's a good opportunity to try out what you got to mix, right?
Okay.
And I think of the planes because everything is either a curved surface or a flat surface or the transitions between them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I'm building up the drywall. Then the next stage three is the development layer, right? And the development layer is where you buckle down and you start somewhere, usually the focal point, and you don't move until you get that to where you want it. Now and at this stage, see the second stage you're thinking of it, it's like this jewelry box or something that you're putting together, the planes, or you're
Mm-hmm.
putting up the walls. In the third stage, you're beginning to think about sculptural, the structure, right? Like the head is a ball, the nose is a ball, the top of the nose is a cylinder, the head is a block, your side plane, front plane,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And you start thinking about what's happening sculpturally, what's coming towards you, how far does it come towards you, how far does it go away. You're thinking in depth as well, right? So you're thinking Z. So like in the first pass, you're just thinking XY coordinates, sideways, up and down. Now by the third pass, you're fully thinking how deep does this feel like it's going. So you're thinking in the Z space as well, and you're thinking about the modeling and you're being a sculptor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth pass is what I call, and I grab it from the CG artists, and I call it the beauty pass. And the beauty pass is where now it's a real person, right? Up
Mm-hmm.
until then, up until then, it's first just a collection of shapes, and then it's a collection of forms, right? And then it's a real person, and it's a real piece of art. So now the fourth pass involves a lot of looking. There's not much fourth pass in this, but there is some, right? There's some glazing, that you go in, you add a little, oh, you want to make the cheek a little bit redder to make it look like him. I wanted to add strengthen the highlight in the eye so it looks more like he's crying. Um, the you look at the background color, is that right? Or you darken up a whole area, you lighten a whole area. It involves a lot of staring and deciding, you know, how to make it art, how to make it a person, how is it getting the message that you're trying to. Sometimes you have to simplify. Sometimes you take an area that you really worked out and you say, oh no, you know what? I can do this better in two strokes, two brush strokes. But once you've done it, once you've developed it and done all that detail, to simplify it is much easier.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think the beauty pass is, because in the end, we're trying to make it art. And one of the things that I tell my students um, is that it's not enough for the strokes to be the right size, the right value, the right color, the right shape, in the right place. They got to be beautiful too. And what's beautiful, I don't know. That's your job as an artist to show us what beauty is, right? What's beautiful to you is the way you put that is beautiful is different for somebody else. You know what I mean? But it's
Mm-hmm.
got to be beautiful to you. That's where it starts. You got to make the strokes that you say, wow, this is beautiful to me, right? Um, Keeping in mind that there's no absolute, right?
Right.
That's your job to hold up what you think is beautiful to us. And if it means doing this whole painting with a Brillo pad, and so be it, right? Or all sables, or all bristles, or whatever, right? It's up to you to make a case for it. That's the freedom. That's what we have as artists. And what a great job, right? What a great
Mm-hmm.
job we have, um, to hold up what's beautiful. And then I like to take it even further than beauty, and say, the painting, we should strive for the sublime, sublime. And I learned that from the track 2016, I think it was, with Zamir Zeki, who gave this big talk. Zamir Zeki was a neuroscientist who gave a talk about how art affects your brain. Um, and he talked about the sublime, and he called it beauty on steroids. And so you think of beauty like this beautiful bouquet of flowers. The sublime is something like Hamlet, right? Where you not only are impressed by the beauty, but it leaves you thinking and it stays with you.
Hmm.
Like I remember reading War and Peace, and it still has still stayed with when I was in my 20s. And it stayed with me all these years. I still feel those characters. I still think I know them.
Hmm.
Right? I think that's what the sublime is. It's Hamlet, when both from the audience and from the actor, the audience is looking at Hamlet and crying their tears out, yet thoroughly enjoying it, and then thinking about the artist at the same time. The actor is performing how, on the outside, he's breaking apart because of the death of Ophelia, and on the inside, he's thoroughly enjoying his pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's my definition, or actually Zamir Zeki's, which I've adopted, right? Definition of the sublime, right? So the goal, I don't know if I've ever reached it, but I try, right? That's the goal, is to try, whether you reach it or not, is
Mm-hmm.
that everything that we do, every inch, like even the haphazard marks on the background, right? Even as you're doing them, they're thought about, they're thought out. I love the sloppy look, that's from my love of the abstract expressionists. I love that sloppy look. But they're not just thrown away. I don't, I'm thinking about how I'm putting them down in a way that's interesting, right? Because
Yeah.
I think that's the one rule with all art. There's every rule can be broken, but the one rule is make it an interesting, compelling image, right? Make it
Mm-hmm.
something somebody wants to look at. And even that rule could be broken when you think about the minimalists who made things interesting by just making one thin line on a 6 foot canvas.
Hmm.
Make it interesting, right? Um, make it fun to look at.
Hmm.
I think is the best is my advice, right? I'm not saying the
Yeah.
best advice, or this is the way everybody should do it or should handle it. But this is what I'm striving for. It's not enough. That's my idea. It's not enough for it to be in the right place, the right shape, right value. It should be beautiful too, beautifully applied and interesting. And in my case, interesting means, and it could be different for anybody else, right? In my case, interesting is varied and different strokes and different applications, using the blush at a low angle, using it at a high angle, thick and thin, and sometimes glazed and sometimes impasto. You know, all of that stuff is what makes it interesting for me. For other people, it could be doing the whole painting with a 000 brush.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's only you. There's what you think, and that's where you start. And if you believe in it, you'll find other people that believe in you. I guarantee you, you got to make the paintings that
Hmm.
you like. You
That's
know,
good advice. And that, speaking of advice, before we close the podcast, I want to ask you one final question, and that is for aspiring artists. What advice would you give them?
um, I think the advice that I believe Odd Nedrum would have given me, had I
Really?
had the guts to meet with him, and that would be, stick to your guns. Make the paintings, make the paintings that you love, that you would buy, right? And develop the skill to make the paintings. I think regardless of what anybody tells you, there's all these rules, Fibonacci and all that stuff that people, I think of them as ideas that give you certain feelings to the painting. Take them and use them. I think every great work of art has three things, and I call them the three C's. And keep this in mind, right? The first C is character. It's your point of view. Character is your point of view, right? People need to know how they see you, what is your point of view and how's it different and how's it interesting? You know, why are you doing this painting? Why are you why are you taking 5 weeks out of your life and the life and your time with your kids to do a painting, right? Why are you doing it? You know, what is your point of view? What are you trying to say? Rather than be all over the place. What's important to you? If it's really important to you, it will be important to other people. That's one. The second is conflict, right? Nobody writes a book about nothing. Um, by conflict, you make it interesting. I think, you know, conflict can be the subject matter, it can be the painting, the composition, and it can be even the artist himself. When you think about Van Gogh, a lot of our love of Van Gogh is the conflict in his own life that we respond to. Not uh, including this conflict in his painting. That's beautiful, right? But the you know you know you can find visual conflict. You can find conflict in the subject matter. If you make a bunch of lines this way, make some this way, or cross. Bunch of straight curved lines, make a straight line. Bunch of squares, make some circles. A lot of big shapes, little shapes. Find the conflict: light, dark, warm, cool, red, blue, red, green. Right? Find the conflict. Play with it. Right? You have a lot of painting that's mostly red, and then you have a little dab of some muted green. It's beautiful, or vice versa. Right? You find the conflict. Conflict is drives the world. It makes the painting interesting. And then the third is confidence, right? Develop the technique to make the paintings that you want to do, whatever that is, right? Spend time working on the technique. This is skill-based art, right? But even if you're not, you can't, no argument can be made that Jackson Pollock wasn't confident with those drips. Like every once in a while you see somebody making fun of him doing drips and saying, oh, look, I could do a Jackson Pollock. But there's something that's missing. There's a confidence that Jackson Pollock has, right? Um, the confidence is what the teacher gives you, right? What you go to classes, what you do life drawing from. Develop the confidence to make the paintings you want to make, that you want to make. It's painterly, it's great. If it's every single pour, that's just as great. It's all valid, but you gotta love it. No, I think of painting as if it's a vehicle, right? Or art in general, if it's a vehicle, right? You have the vehicle has a motor and it has doors, right? The motor is what the subject's about. There's all the conflict. It's what the painting is about. The motor takes you places, right? By the same token, the door are the beautiful aesthetics of the painting. If you walk by a painting that's just doesn't attract you, that's not compelling, doesn't matter how good it is, the subject, you walk by it. It's a car. If you have a car, it could have the most beautiful outside, the most beautiful doors in the world, and easy to get in. You get in the car, right? And it has no motor. It's not taking you anywhere. It's painting just for the sake of beauty. By the same token, right? You can have, the most powerful engine in the world capable of driving, a freight train, and it's beautiful and chrome. If the car has no doors, it's still not taking you anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these three C's help you find that, confidence, character, and conflict, right? That's the one thing that I think all great art has. It has those three things. When I think of Rembrandt, if I say Rembrandt, you know exactly where I'm coming from. If I say Picasso, if I say Vermeer, if I say de Kooning, every single one of those artists, you're clear who they are. And if somebody tries to paint like Rembrandt, you say, oh, this person's painting like Rembrandt, right? Or this person's trying to paint like Rubens, right? But I say Rubens, you have a clear idea of what that is. That's character. That's character. When I say Jeff Hines, I know exactly what that is. I recognize your painting. 20 people, 300 people will post, and they'll say one is Jeff Hines. I guarantee you, I'll pick yours out because I know I see you're very clear in who you are as an artist and how you paint, what you paint, how you apply the strokes. All of that is clear. That's character. Who are you? Right? And like I said, the rest, confidence. There's no doubt for in your case that you have confidence. I mean, you've developed your technique to an amazing level,
Oh,
right?
thank
You
you.
have tremendous amount of confidence in your work. You know if you're going to give a demo that you'll be able to do whatever you need to do, right? And conflict, that's all the stuff that we learned, the composition for, all that stuff fits into that. Rule of thirds, discovered light, Fibonacci series, alternation, all that stuff that we learn about composition, right? That's all in the conflict.
Hmm.
It's all a way of creating conflict, of creating, and when you look at a Rembrandt and he does alternation, in other words, the light, dark, like train tracks going in the background, right? He's making us take this two-dimensional piece and making us feel it's three-dimensional, like you're walking through it. That's conflict,
Mm-hmm.
right? Alternation is a way of finding conflict. Almost everything, warm, cool, theory. That's a way of finding conflict. All those ideas, right? Balance or
Hmm.
imbalance.
Yeah, I like that.
That's it.
I've always defined great art as three things as well. And it's interesting how much they overlap with your definition. And mine are concept, design, and craftsmanship.
Yep.
But they really overlap quite well, although I like
You
the way you
overlap.
put it. I like the way you put it because it opens up more of a discussion and it's yours is much more of a broad definition that opens itself up to interpretation a little bit more. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because like you say, what is craft, right? Like if we're looking at, we look at, say, compare Bouguereau to Sargent, right? Two are different ideas of what craft in a painting is.
Right. Well, so confidence
You
is a
know,
great alternative to that. I
confidence.
like that. I like that. That's beautiful. Well, hey man, dude, I love talking to you. I hope to see you at the
Me
Porch
too.
Society next year.
I'm gonna try to make it. It's been tough these last years, but I'm gonna try to
I
make
hope
it this
so.
year.
But yeah, it's always fun and hanging out with you. So I appreciate this conversation. And
Me too.
yeah, thanks again. Thanks for tuning in to the Undraped Artist Podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you could, leave a comment or review. That really helps the channel. Please share the show with your friends. And if you're feeling generous, consider a monthly donation at theundrapedartist.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.